welcome. This is another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. Very, very sinful audience. This is what we've concluded. Anyway, coming up, a concise collection involving a hitchhiking hokum, the downfall of Dirk and Dennis, a panty and ping-pong prank. Good. Plus the hijacking of Hudson's Hillman. It's all to come in this entertaining selection. It's another Drive Tide confession, and it's Sister Bobby from the Priory is in.
I am taking Alan Dedicoat's seat.
Making a guest appearance.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're a forgiving person. I think you're quite, harsh.
Depends.
Stern, I think.
I think you're right.
So let's see. This one, this confession comes from Ragweek Waster. So there's another, there's another studenty vibe going on here. Dear Father Simon and the Holier Than Thou Collective, I make no apology for the fact that this is an old confession. In fact, more than 18 years has passed since you read it out before in March 1996.
Does that make you feel old?
Yes, wow. One of the many things. Hearing the student-themed confession the other day, I wondered whether you would re-forgive me today. What dreadful English. But hey, there are new developments to consider. The year is 1995, and the location, or at least the start of this terrible journey, was the University of Leicester's infamous Rag Week, sponsored hitch to Paris. Remember it now, Simon? No, probably not. I've got no idea. Can't remember. I had volunteered and would be accompanied by my trusty housemate Dan on a journey in aid of comic relief starting at Leicester Forest East Services on the M1. Even tied it into the motorway theme. How about that? So we were to hitch down to London, find our way across London by the kind-spirited drivers of the city, then get a lift on whichever motorway we needed for Dover. We would then use the journey on the ferry to secure our lift from Calais to Paris, and then rendezvous, proud as punch, and not too far behind the victorious group the following lunchtime. Except we didn't hitch at all. We waited until everyone had left the services, got the train back to Leicester, and then got on another train to St Pancras. And then had to wait a bit longer, have some beer and lunch, and then pretend to walk around central London looking for a lift to Dover. And then we got on another train to Dover. No hitching involved yet. We then pretended to look for another lift on the ferry. This involved sitting in the bar and chatting. We then got to Calais and rewarded ourselves with a night in a Calais hotel. Ever conscious of our charity work, though, we shared a bed and used a pillow, an old-fashioned bolster, actually, to keep our sides. The following morning, we went to the station and got on a train to Paris. So not a lot of hitching at all. Our timing was impeccable. We weren't too early, but certainly not last, and we joined the tales of our hitching experience with our fellow money-raising Rag Week participants. They looked exhausted, poor things. We were fresh as daisies, but pretended to look bad. One couple had had 2 breakdowns. Another had had a weird experience with a French farmer and 100 sheep. One guy had started and finished a relationship with a French lady in the duration of one car journey. One hitcher hadn't eaten for 24 hours. Another only eaten grapes to save money. We, on the other hand, had been on trains, stayed in hotels, and had eaten quite a few pain au chocolat. Dan felt increasingly bad about this and swore me to secrecy for 12 months because he was moving to Sweden and wanted to put some distance between us. I can't think why. So 12 months later, I emailed you, probably one of the first emails ever sent, and asked you to help me confess to all our friends whose money had been so shamelessly spent on train tickets and hotels. So here is the update. Here is what happened next. And so it's what I quite like about this confession. We don't often know what happens next in the story. Well, as you read it out, Father Simon, doors started to open in my third-year accommodation block, and within 2 minutes my room was full of my so-called friends staring at me incredulously. They had all guessed, notwithstanding the anonymity, as I'd included the bit about Dan needing to leg it to Sweden. I was derided as heartless, mean and a disgrace. I could tell they secretly thought it was a good wheeze, but that's what they said anyway. So, Father Simon, I need forgiveness once again, this time not just for conning all our student friends out of their much-needed chip and beer money, but for outing my dear friend Dan. You see, I did repay all the sponsorship money, and I made sure that Comic Relief received all the cash that they should have had, because I'll need Richard Curtis on my side when it comes to the last hurrah. But Dan is still in Sweden. We exchanged Christmas cards and a text on Eurovision night, and he came to my wedding and snogged my bridesmaid, but I have ostracized, there's another confession there, yeah. I have ostracized a close friend, I feel, and he feels he can never darken these shores again. He still thinks he can't return to the UK, but if you absolve him, and us this time, maybe he'll return to his homeland to start a new life. If not, exile it is. Please forgive me. Don't identify me, please, unless you want to try and contact Dan and we can all come on the radio. No, it's all right. We'll just call you a ragweek waster. So I can't remember what happened last time. I don't remember the story, but you do get these stories every now and again. Thank you very much indeed for the PS. So, someone's exile is hanging on this, depending on whether they're forgiven or not. So what do you think, Sister Rebecca?
No pressure there. If you absolve my friend Dan, you'll completely change his life and he'll be able to come back to the UK from Sweden.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I'm feeling a little bit under the cosh here. Like, I really should forgive. I have to say, I was a bit cross about this because they're obviously using money that should have gone to charity to pay for their trains and hotels, etc. But he did repay the money.
Repaid the money to come at
and also, I mean, I like the idea of everyone listening to the confession whenever it was first read out years ago.
1995.
Everyone listening and then coming in to shout at him. So in a way, I think he has paid his penance. So given that Dan's future is hanging on this, I'm going to forgive you.
It might be that Dan's got no intention of coming back to Sweden at all because he doesn't want to. He's very happy in Sweden, actually. Thank you very much indeed. Sister Bobby from the Priory.
Well, it has the 3 Ds, doesn't it? Deceitful, devious, duplicitous. And they're not good things, but as they did repay the money, I'm a little bit with Rebecca here. It's Rag Week. They did it. They went in comfort. Actually, in the interest of safety, if I was their mum and dad, I would glad that they did it that way because at least they actually made it back in one piece. Because there's always, do people still do this for charity? Do they still hitchhike?
Yes.
Is it safe? Sorry, being a bit of a, I wouldn't want my kids to do that. So in the interest of safety, you're forgiven for doing it in the first place. For outing your mate, absolutely not.
The softer side of Bobby Pryor. What do you think, brother?
It strikes me that the whole point of this thing was that you were supposed to be hitching. You were supposed to have the experience of hitching all the way to France and then back again. If you're not hitching, all you're having is a not very good weekend away.
Yes.
And, going by train, staying in a hotel, having a few pan of chocolate. What was the point of that? No point. You may as well have done something else. Done something else with the money. And also, Dan needs to man up. We don't think we're going to extradite you from Sweden because of this. You need to come over and snog a few more bridesmaids. I'm going to say not forgiven because there's just no point. No point at all.
Bobby from the Priory is back in, so it's nice to have you back.
Thank you. Until Alan returns.
And part-time Pauline is also here, and you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling a bit mean, though.
Why?
I don't know. It's a bad mood.
Wait, okay. Look out, everybody. The doer Presbyterian rage is about to take hold. Even though I have no idea whether you're doer or
You have
Presbyterian.
no clue.
No, I have absolutely no idea. It just fits a stereotype. Tonight's tale comes from Elaine. Thank you very much indeed. Dear Simon and the Collective, I beg forgiveness for the following student hijinks, which were entered into with the best of intentions, but nonetheless I consider now to be beyond the pale. It was the late 1980s, and I was in my first year of a social science degree at a North London Polytechnic. Being 20 and a half, the half I feel being very important, I saw myself as a more mature student and above the pranks perpetrated by some of my colleagues. The incident in question occurred when a tutor, who I shall call Anushka, set an assignment for my tutor group on the social contract by the Genevan philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who, you probably know, and coincidentally also published a book called Confessions, published in 1782. His, though, was slightly less funny than yours and rarely involved flying hamsters and mooning miners. If only he got that right, if Jean-Jacques Rousseau, his Confessions would have been a hoot, wouldn't they? In the 18th century, they'd have had nothing like that before. Anyway. Now, Anushka was a feminist and a socialist who had probably single-handedly started the Hungarian Velvet Revolution before coming to England. She was sweet, intelligent and completely disorganised. Two of my group, let's call them Dirk and Dennis, decided to take advantage of this disorganisation by claiming to have submitted an essay, whilst actually having done nothing of the sort. Very reprehensible, I'm sure you'll agree. Being a moral and, as I have previously said, mature sort, I thought this a terrible trick to play on this tutor and decided to intercede to teach them a lesson by submitting essays in their names.
Excellent.
Another group member, we'll call her Lynn, who was the girlfriend of Dennis, overheard my plan and decided to join in. Together we concocted the worst, most badly written and completely imbecilic version of Rousseau's masterpiece ever put together and handed it in their names. Whilst Rousseau said man is born free but is everywhere in chains, in Dirk and Dennis's version, Rousseau's reference to chains suggested that we were in a kind of a 50 Shades of Grey kind of scenario. Where Rousseau had written the revelries of a solitary walker, Dirk and Dennis's version seemed to suggest it was the reveries of Scott Walker, the 60s pop singer. They also seemed to suggest he had pioneered underwater exploration on his boat, Calypso. Imagine the scene. We are gathered together in Anushka's office, Dirk and Dennis smugly waiting to reassure her that they had submitted their essays and she must have lost them because she's disorganised like that. Lynn and I calmly waiting to see what would happen next. To this day, I remember Dirk and Dennis's appalled expressions as Anushka handed them back their essays and the tears of disbelief when she berated them on their poor understanding of this seminal work, demanding that they attend remedial lessons to ensure that they grasped the important concepts contained within this work, charges that they could not in any way rebut as they'd already insisted that they had handed the essays in. Large sections of their essays had big red crossings out and "Is this a joke?" written in large letters. Lynn, I have to say, nearly ruined it all by collapsing into giggles and later admitted that she had told her boyfriend of her guilt. I continued to deny any involvement and, being a total goody-goody two-shoes, got away with it scot-free. But now's the time to tell all. Dear collective, I ask forgiveness not of Dirk and Dennis, who deserved everything they got, but rather of Anushka, who deserved better than to be hoodwinked in so cavalier a fashion. Your humble and most repentant servant. That's from Elaine. Well, it's very good, and I don't think Jean-Jacques Rousseau's social contract has ever come up in a confession before. But if there are other philosophy-based confessions, we'll take them very happily. confessions@bbc.co.uk. Let's see what the collective make of this. Sister Pauline.
Despite my earlier warning, I love this. I think it's terrific. I think she's got nothing to complain about, nothing to worry about, nothing to feel sorry for about, because poor Anushka would have been in a worse position if these two reprobates had got away with trying to hoodwink her into thinking they'd handed something in when they hadn't. She'd have been very upset and disturbed as opposed to just disappointed and annoyed. So no, totally forgiven. Well done.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way it's going to go. Let's see what Bobby from the Priory makes of it.
Yeah, it's difficult not to agree. Inspired. First class degree really for that. Just for that alone, really. For writing.
I bet it took ages to write a rubbish essay.
Super smart. I'd love to have read those essays. It must have been an hilarious. And also, actually, you're right, a protection of Anushka, sorry, not Nanushka, so that's a different tutor. Anushka would have been very embarrassed about herself. So you actually saved her and protected them. You 10 out of 10 say first class degree.
Because we've often had cheaty confessions, but I don't think I've ever had someone who's written a really rubbish essay on behalf of someone who was planning to cheat. Brother Matthew.
Yeah, no, that's why I love it. I love the best bit is the getting Jean-Jacques Rousseau as being a submariner. His pioneering work as Jacques Cousteau. Super. I'd love to have seen that. There was a danger that this might have backfired. That they might have actually written an essay that Anushka would go, what an interesting way of looking at the subject, I'm going to give you an A. So I'm glad that they didn't, and I'm also, this is one in the eye for all those smug students who do I totally haven't revised, I'm just going into this blind kind of attitude, which I abhor. So for that, I'm definitely going to forgive.
Oh, look, Tina Ritchie. Tina is joining us for the... Is this your first time?
It is.
In the confession?
It is my first time.
Well, it's good to have Tina on.
It's very good to be here.
Memories of Breakfast Show, 1989, something like that?
Something like that,
anyway.
Simon.
89, 91, 93, who knows? It was all the same.
Let's not do dates.
Okay. No. So here comes the confession. This one comes from Michael. Thank you very much indeed, Michael, for tonight's tale. Dear Simon and those who may wish to consider forgiving me, I have a confession that needs to be forgiven, as it is in the interests of peace between two nations. That's what this is. Back in the late 90s, but let's not do dates, I had finished university and I was seeing a young lady in the Midlands. In my first proper job, I had disposable income and we loved nothing more than disappearing on spec to a different part of the country, grabbing a B&B and going out on the town. We really were footloose and fancy-free. That summer, we both had some time off and decided that we would disappear on one of our trips. Again, impromptu and with nowhere booked, a true adventure would be had. Firstly, we travelled a short drive to North Wales, enjoying ice cream and fish and chips on the beach. As night fell, we hadn't sorted out any accommodation, and this quaint seaside village was all booked up, as was the whole of North Wales. Well, we didn't want to return home, so we got in the car and we continued going north. My girlfriend recommended Manchester I always think, what, all of it, from some great nightclubs that she remembered, and we headed an hour or so north to get to Manchester. When we got there, it was getting quite late, and we grew more and more desperate for accommodation. The problem was, everywhere was booked up. It transpired that particular year, Manchester was hosting the World Table Tennis Championships, and the city's hostels, hotels and B&Bs were chock full of fans and competitors. With very little hope left, a certain well-known hotel chain recommended that we could stay in their sister hotel, which was nearby. Yes, it was another drive away, but it was somewhere to stay, and at this point we were hungry and we were thirsty, so we made haste towards our now reserved hotel. We checked in, we hit the town. After a takeaway pizza and lots of well-deserved wine, heard that phrase before, we returned to the hotel bar for a nightcap, which of course...
Yeah.
I've taken out quite a bit now. Several hours later, we headed up the long winding staircase to bed. I'm afraid that this is where our behaviour needs to be forgiven. Quelle surprise. At the top of the stairs and all the way down the corridor were many, many pairs of pants. Gentlemen's underpants, all the same style but in different colours, hanging from every radiator. There must have been more than 40 pairs.
What?
Pants.
Pants.
I think we're about to find out.
That's
everyone.
clearly what they were thinking.
Pants.
Why are all these pants distributed around this hotel? Seizing the opportunity, we grabbed handfuls of pants, hanging them on door handles,
Yeah.
putting them in cleaning cupboards, loft hatches, hanging them on light fittings. We wrapped some around tomorrow's Daily Mail, left outside some of the rooms. We dangled some in ice buckets. Finally, we returned giggling to our rooms. I woke very early, and as breakfast was included in this rather nice hotel, made my way down to the restaurant. Several pairs of gents' underwear were lying by the door of the cleaning cupboard in the hallway as a reminder of last night's hide the pants escapade. Feeling a little guilty, I put them back on the radiator in the hallway where we found them. But what of the other pants? I'd only rediscovered 6. Confused, I continued to the restaurant for breakfast. There seemed to be an awful lot of men in silver tracksuits at breakfast, maybe 10 or 15 people. They seemed very angry with each other, though I didn't quite understand what they were saying, and it appeared to me that they were shouting at each other in French.
Oh, this is getting better.
As I left, I managed
French pants.
Indeed.
French pants.
As I left, I managed to catch a glimpse of the back of the angry men's tracksuits, which read, France table tennis team. And the penny dropped. Le centime tombé. Sacré bleu, mon Dieu, zut alors, we had kidnapped the pants of the national French table tennis team. I fear there was not a sentence I've ever expected to read. I fear there wasn't time to find sufficient underwear for the final play of the day, and they will have had to negotiate the rigours of their sport with less support than they would have expected. We headed back to watch the final in a Manchester bar. Alas, they lost out in the final to the supremacy of the Chinese, but then the Chinese had their pants, and the French did not. I like to think that on the day, the best team won, but I fear that our antics of the night before might have caused them some underwear distraction. I'd like to ask forgiveness from the people of France, and above all their national team of that year. Also to anybody who found unexpected underwear hanging from their room door the following morning or wrapped around their daily newspaper. I cannot watch table tennis anymore without thinking of this terrible sin, and so I ask for forgiveness. Thank you, Michael. Well, who would have thought that so much fun could be had with ping pong? So let's see what our collective make of that. What do you think, Sister
Well, a
Rebecca?
few things here. I mean, what kind of hotel dries its clients, its guests' underpants on radiators
Well, they probably
in
did
the
it
communal
themselves.
corridor?
They will have done it
Why not just hang it in their own
you-
rooms, for goodness sake?
That is the problem. Washing your pants and then leaving them outside your room.
Ridiculous. There must have
It's
been
a
radiators
fundamental flaw.
inside
Do you think?
or something you could. And also, why didn't the French team have a substitute pair of pants? They only had one pair of pants with them.
does
So I
seem
think, frankly,
excessive.
they deserved it. And also, I'm sure, you know, that if our team was playing, we probably did better as a result. So I'm going to forgive.
The challenge in answering this is not to resort to national stereotypes
No.
about washing
You
or
fucking
anything.
will. Here it comes.
Not going to do that at all. Here's Tina.
No, my mother always said when I went travelling, you must change your pants every day, therefore take lots.
Only
So-
when travelling.
all the time. All the time. So it's their fault. They should have packed more pants.
I think that may well be right. So it's the French. It's the French's fault. That's what
Totally.
you're saying. Okay. Here's Brother Matthew.
Who are we to guess at the customs of our Gallic cousins and their predilection for changing their pants and hanging it? I don't get the why would you hang it outside? I'm not hanging my pants outside of my room. If I'm going to be hanging my pants, it's absolutely in my room. And also, how does that make preparation for your ping pong? Is I'm going to take not just one. I'm going to take all of my pants and put all of my pants in the corridor, and then have a problem with it going missing.
Team. It wasn't just one person.
Well, yes,
with 20 pants.
exactly. The entire team all deciding what we should all do is take all of our pants and put them outside where we can't keep an eye on them. It defies belief. So I am definitely going to forgive. They were asking for it. Absolutely.
You're very welcome, Novice Nigel and Rebecca and Matthew are here ready for this. This is from Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Dear Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. Here's my confession from my time as a callow youth. Far too long ago now. The date was the mid-80s, and the school was a middling independent boys' school in the wilds of Suffolk. As is the wont of most boys, we were usually bored, and as is the wont of most teachers at such middling schools, the staff were usually inclined towards doing the minimum work to preserve their continued employment. One such teacher, Mr. Hudson, who taught physics and applied mathematics, his main aim was to arrive as late as possible, do the minimum work during the day, set as little homework as practical for fear of having to mark it, and leave as quickly as practical at the end of the day.
He's already doing well.
I'm liking him. Yeah. I'm liking him a lot.
His only real interest was his collection of Hillman imps, the pride of the Scottish motor industry. Holding up, there you go, a Hillman imp.
So in case we didn't know, obviously, Rebecca, do you know what one of those was?
I do now.
Yeah, good.
These vehicles were small, light, rear-engined and two doors, and at that point the similarity with Porsche finally ends. Essentially, they were complete motorised disasters. However, Mr. Hudson was inordinately proud of them, and he had quite a number. As part of Mr. Hudson's plan to leave the school premises as quickly as possible, he eschewed even the safety of the staff car park, which was about half a mile from the classrooms and far from the exit, and instead parked the imp near to the science block. This allowed him to park the car as close to his classroom and the north gate, and allowed the imp the fastest possible exit, or at least as fast as an asthmatic imp can actually go.
It sounds like this is some kind of creature you're talking about, not a car.
It is a car. It's definitely a car. No, it's not a creature. The science block was formed of 3 pairs of classrooms, biology, physics and, of course, chemistry, with each pair sandwiching a small prep lab where the long-suffering assistants would prepare experiments and chemicals for us to mangle. This arrangement formed a neat alcove into which a small Hillman imp could be reversed, allowing for a Le Mans-style racing start to be performed. One long and boring lunchtime, I and a few other equally bored sixth formers had tired of impressing the fifth years and turned instead to disparaging the imp. After walking around the car, pointing out its tinny engine with the capacity and power of a can of iron brew, its tyres the width of those of a shopping bicycle, and the bodywork made seemingly constructed from tin foil and spit, we noticed 2 key things about the car. It was very small, and it was quite light. After a number of experiments involving levers, coefficients of friction and angular momentum, you see the physics lessons hadn't been completely wasted, the plan was formed. After recruiting a couple of extra bodies the next Thursday, it was selected as I-Day, selected as that was the day of post-lunch break double physics. Our plan was executed during lunch. It was therefore impossible to concentrate on physics that afternoon. I think compound pendulums were involved, and as was traditional for this lesson, Mr. Hudson had finished teaching 10 minutes early and had already packed his case, ready for his quick getaway. Mr. Hudson was watching the clock almost as avidly as we were watching Mr. Hudson. As the bell rang, he dashed from the room, first as ever to leave. We were following slowly behind. The yells of fury and anguish could be heard halfway across Suffolk, and by the time we reached the car, there was a considerable crowd to witness the fate of the Hillman imp. You see, our investigations had identified one key aspect of the imp. It was just slightly shorter than the alcove was wide. We had also discovered that the imp could be lifted by sufficient pupils and then rotated through 90 degrees and slid into the furthest depths of the space between the 2 classrooms. This left a space of about 6 inches to the front and 6 inches to the back of the Hillman imp. There was to be no quick exit for Mr. Hudson this particular evening. We estimated that it took approximately a 170-point turn to extract the imp from its prison. inching forward minutely and then reversing, and then inching forward minutely and then reversing 170 times, each time rotating the car a minuscule amount. In the 80s, there was no CCTV and so no way to identify the culprit, so no punishment was forthcoming. But from that point on, Mr. Hudson's imps resided safely in the staff car park, with Mr. Hudson having to walk the length of the school every evening to collect it. Therefore, I need forgiveness, please, not from Mr. Hudson, but from the poor abused imp whose clutch and engine were tortured in the process of extracting the car. Can the collective provide redemption, please, for a group of vehicle torturers? Well, it's an interesting story. I can just imagine the scene. A splendid idea with a whole bunch of sixth formers lifting a car, rotating it 90 degrees. Obviously, these things should be discouraged, even though it was pretty good fun. What do we think, Sister Rebecca?
Oh, I think that's a hilarious prank. And I love the way that obviously Mr. Hudson wasn't brave enough to say, come on, can you just help me lift it back?
No.
You know, just turn it around so that I can get the car out. And what was it, 100 and how many points?
Well, he was guessing at 170.
I think it serves him right for not wanting to stay longer in his classes and for rushing off at the end of them and for being a lazy teacher. So
He was, wasn't
I
he?
am going to completely forgive you.
Lazy teacher confessions. I wonder how many of those we'll get. Hillman Imp confessions, don't know about those. Let's see what the novice makes of it.
Well, absolutely. I think he's a terrible teacher, by the sounds of it, and didn't have a lot of bottle to ask the boys to help him out. And also I've worked out that some of those sixth formers must have been marooned on the wrong side of the imp and then had to vault the car, held together with spit and foil.
Well,
So,
that's his description of it.
Yeah, but yes, I wasn't being realistic. Actually, it was in reality. But so I think it was a really jolly jape. I once found my car at college in the hall of the college. They carried it in and they had to put it in on its side. I couldn't drive it out.
Well, they carried your car in?
Yes.
What car was this?
It was a Honda Civic, the silver one that leaked a bit. Yeah,
How did they get that in?
yeah. Some very burly South Africans.
Why did they pick on you?
Oh, I think it was a jolly jape. And they thought had a very refined sense of humour, which as they
Those
were all
hilarious
about 6
rugby
foot 8.
players, don't you love them?
Oh, they're just so wacky, aren't
Yeah,
they?
but
Crazy.
they had to put it on its side again to take it out because I couldn't do that.
Brother Matthew.
I'm going to take issue with Mr. Hudson being described as a lazy teacher. He's doing the bare minimum, but he's doing it. You know, I mean, he's doing all the lessons. He's not putting homework out, but at least he's turned up. And also, the Hillman Imp's taking a bit of a bashing here. I'm sure there's plenty of people who have fond memories of the Hillman Imp. I don't, but you know,
Stop being all balanced.
Yes, I am being balanced. I'm going to say I like this, but I'm not going to forgive because my sympathies are definitely with Mr. Hudson. I love the fact that normally teachers say the bell is not for you, the bell is for me, but clearly the bell's for everyone in Mr. Hudson's classes because he's out the door anyway, doesn't care. So I am not going to forgive just because I'm a big fan of Hudson.
One of my children, by the way, has informed me that if you're forced to stay like more than 30 seconds after the bell, it's against your human rights or something like that. They were this week's confessions. Who did you forgive? Now, maybe inspired by one of those, send us your own shadowy secret. Confessions at bbc.co.uk, more in a week, and the Weekly Mayo available to download now and every Friday. Thank you.